The year was 2087, and the stars belonged to everyone now. Earth floated in the darkness of space, no longer alone. Ships from distant worlds came and went like birds returning to their nests. The planet had become the center of something much bigger than anyone had imagined 50 years ago. Above Earth, a massive space station called New Hollywood spun slowly in orbit. It was beautiful, with gleaming metal walls and windows that showed the blue planet below. Tonight, the station was full of people dressed in their finest clothes. They had come from all over the galaxy for the Terra Foundation Charity Gala, the most important social event of the year. Sandra walked through the entrance hall of the station, her footsteps quiet on the polished floor. She wore a simple blue dress that she had owned for several years. It was clean and pressed, but nothing fancy. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she carried a small purse that had seen better days. At 63, she moved with the careful grace of someone who had spent years working in difficult places. She looked around at the other guests and felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Everyone else seemed to shine like jewels. The women wore dresses that cost more than most people made in a year. Their jewelry caught the light from crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. The men stood tall in perfectly fitted suits, talking loudly about business deals and vacation homes on distant planets. Sandra had not wanted to come tonight. She preferred her work in the refugee camps on the outer planets, where people needed real help. But the Terra Foundation had insisted she attend. They said her presence was important for the cause. She still did not understand why. Across the main ballroom, 3 women stood together near a table covered with expensive alien wines. Victoria Kane wore a dress made from silk that came from the spider creatures of Vega Prime. It was deep red and hugged her thin frame perfectly. Diamond earrings from the crystal mines of Jupiter's moons hung from her ears. She was 45, but looked younger, thanks to the best medical treatments money could buy. Next to her stood Linda Price, wrapped in a gown that seemed to change colors as she moved. The fabric came from the rainbow fish of the Andromeda colonies and cost more than a small house. Her blonde hair was piled high on her head, held in place by pins made from rare metals found only in asteroid belts. The third woman, Betty Stone, had chosen a black dress covered in tiny lights that twinkled like stars. Her husband owned half the mining operations in the Outer Rim, and she made sure everyone knew it. She wore gloves that went up to her elbows and a necklace made from pearls grown in the methane seas of Titan. These 3 women were the queens of high society. Their husbands controlled shipping companies, mining operations, and manufacturing plants that stretched across dozens of star systems. They had never worked a day in dangerous conditions or slept in a tent under alien skies. Their biggest worry was which party to attend next. Victoria spotted Sandra first. She nudged Linda with her elbow and whispered something behind her gloved hand. Linda looked in Sandra's direction and covered her mouth to hide a laugh. Betty turned to see what they were talking about and raised her eyebrows in surprise. In another part of the ballroom, a man sat quietly at a table near the diplomatic section. Keanu looked much the same as he had 20 years ago, though his hair was now completely gray and lines showed around his eyes. He wore a simple black suit that fit him well but did not draw attention. Most people at the gala knew him as a famous actor from the old days, but few understood his real job now. As Earth's chief cultural liaison to the Galactic Federation, Keanu spent his days meeting with representatives from alien civilizations. He helped solve problems before they became wars. He made sure that humans understood other species and that other species understood humans. It was difficult work that required patience and wisdom, qualities he had developed over many years. Tonight, he was here in an official capacity, but he preferred to watch from the edges of the crowd. He had learned that people showed their true nature when they thought important people were not watching. He sipped a glass of water and observed the other guests with quiet attention. Near the center of the ballroom, several alien dignitaries moved through the crowd. Ambassador Zeth of the Andromedan Council was easy to spot because of his tall, thin frame and silver skin that reflected the lights overhead. He wore robes that marked his high rank in his society. Despite his strange appearance, he spoke perfect English and had a kind smile for everyone he met. High Minister Kira from the Centauri Alliance stood near the buffet table, her blue skin marked with the ritual scars that showed her wisdom and experience. She was smaller than most humans but commanded respect wherever she went. Her people had been among the first to make peace with Earth, and she had become a good friend to many humans over the years. These alien guests were not here just for the party. They came because they genuinely cared about the work the Terra Foundation did. The Foundation helped refugees from wars and disasters across the galaxy. It built schools and hospitals on planets where different species had to learn to live together. It trained people to work with aliens whose ways of thinking were completely different from human ways. Sandra made her way slowly toward the main dining area, unaware that she was being watched by several different groups of people. She stopped to read a display about the Foundation's latest project, a settlement for families who had lost their homes when their sun went supernova. The pictures showed children of 3 different species playing together while their parents worked to build new lives. The evening was just beginning, and already the undercurrents of social tension were building like storm clouds on the horizon. Sandra had no idea that her simple presence at this elegant gathering would soon reveal truths about humanity that would surprise everyone in the room, including herself. As the first course was served and the formal program began, the stage was set for a confrontation that would change how everyone thought about power, dignity, and what it truly meant to represent the human race among the stars. Sandra moved toward the refreshment table, hoping to find a quiet corner where she could eat in peace. The ballroom was getting more crowded as the evening went on. Laughter and conversation filled the air, mixing with soft music from a string quartet in the corner. She had just picked up a small plate when she heard someone speaking loudly behind her. "Oh my goodness, look at that dress," Victoria Kane said, her voice carrying across the nearby tables. "Is that from the bargain section of some discount store?" Sandra felt her cheeks grow warm. She knew they were talking about her, but she tried to ignore it. She had dealt with much worse things in her life. She reached for a small sandwich and placed it carefully on her plate. Linda Price moved closer to Victoria, speaking just loud enough for people around them to hear. "I think she got lost on her way to the soup kitchen. Someone should tell her this is a charity gala, not a place where charity is handed out." Several other guests turned to look. Some seemed uncomfortable, but others started to smile. Betty Stone joined her friends, looking Sandra up and down like she was examining a piece of broken furniture. "That purse has definitely seen better days," Betty said with a laugh. "I threw away nicer bags than that one. Maybe we should take up a collection to buy her something decent to carry." Sandra's hands trembled slightly as she set down the serving spoon. She had hoped to attend the gala quietly, listen to the speeches about helping refugees, and then return to her work. She had not expected to become the center of attention in such a cruel way. More socialites gathered around Victoria, Linda, and Betty. The group grew larger as women in expensive dresses moved closer to hear what was happening. They formed a circle that blocked Sandra's path to the tables. "I heard she used to be in movies," said a woman with bright red hair and emerald earrings. "That was a long time ago. Now she works with those alien refugees out on the frontier planets." "How sad," Victoria replied, shaking her head. "She must be desperate for attention to show up here looking like that. Does she really think people want to see her at an event like this?" Sandra tried to step around the group, but Linda moved to block her path. "Excuse me," Linda said with false sweetness. "Are you sure you can afford to donate to tonight's cause? This is a pretty expensive charity event. Maybe you should save your money for a new dress instead." The words hit Sandra like physical blows. She had donated more money to refugee causes than most of these women spent on their jewelry. She had given not just money but years of her life, sleeping in tents and eating basic food while helping families find new homes among the stars. "I work with the Foundation," Sandra said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have been helping refugees for 15 years. Betty laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, that explains it. You are one of those people who think working with aliens makes you special. How noble of you to leave real civilization behind and play in the dirt with creatures from other worlds." More guests were watching now. Sandra could see some of them, whispering to each other and pointing in her direction. A few looked sorry for her, but most seemed to think the whole thing was entertaining. I bet she cannot even afford to be here tonight, Linda said loudly. Someone probably gave her a free ticket out of pity. Poor thing, trying to relive her glory days when she was actually important. Victoria nodded agreement. It is embarrassing, really. She should have stayed home instead of making everyone uncomfortable. This is supposed to be an elegant evening, not a charity case parade. Sandra felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had faced down armed raiders on frontier planets and negotiated with alien warlords to save innocent lives. She would not be broken by these cruel women and their expensive clothes. Across the ballroom, Ambassador Zeth had been watching the scene unfold. His silver skin grew darker, which among his people was a sign of growing anger. He did not understand why these humans were deliberately causing pain to one of their own kind. High Minister Kira noticed the commotion as well. Her blue skin flushed purple around her ritual scars, another sign of displeasure. She had worked with humans for many years and had come to respect their capacity for kindness. This behavior confused and disappointed her. Several other alien dignitaries began to pay attention to what was happening. They moved closer to get a better view, though they stayed at a respectful distance. Among their own people, such public cruelty would be considered a serious breach of social order. At his table near the diplomatic section, Keanu set down his glass of water and stood up slowly. His jaw was tight with controlled anger, but his movements remained calm and deliberate. He had seen enough. Look at her shoes, Betty was saying now. Those cannot be real leather. Probably some synthetic material from the cheap factories on Mars. How pathetic. And that hairstyle, added another woman who had joined the group. Did she cut it herself? It looks like she used a bowl as a guide. Sandra closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. She thought about the children she had helped escape from war zones, the families she had reunited across light years of space, and the peace treaties she had witnessed being signed because different species had learned to trust each other. These women knew nothing about real hardship or genuine accomplishment. They measured worth by the cost of clothing and the size of bank accounts. They had never held a dying alien child in their arms or helped a family rebuild their lives on a strange new world. I should go, Sandra said softly, more to herself than to the women surrounding her. Yes, you should, Victoria agreed with a cruel smile. This event is for people who actually matter in society. Maybe next time you will think twice before trying to mix with your betters. The crowd of socialites laughed and nodded their agreement. They felt powerful and important, standing together against someone they saw as beneath them. They had no idea that their behavior was being watched by beings who would remember this moment for years to come. Sandra began to turn away, her dignity intact despite the humiliation. But before she could take a step, a familiar voice spoke from behind the crowd of women. Excuse me, ladies. The voice was calm and polite, but it carried an authority that made everyone in the nearby area stop talking and turn to look. The circle of women turned to see who had spoken. Keanu stood behind them, his hands clasped behind his back. His face was calm, but his dark eyes held a coldness that made several of the socialites step backward. Oh my, Victoria said, her voice suddenly bright and sweet. Keanu, what a wonderful surprise. We were just having a little chat with this woman here. Linda smoothed her hair and smiled widely. We had no idea you were at the party tonight. You look absolutely wonderful. That suit is perfect on you. Betty pushed forward, trying to get closer to him. We were just telling this person that she might be more comfortable at a different type of event. You understand how these things work. Image is so important at gatherings like this. Keanu looked at each woman in turn, his expression never changing. Then he looked at Sandra, who stood quietly with her plate still in her hands. Her face was red with embarrassment, but she held her head high. I see, Keanu said slowly. And what makes you think she does not belong here? Victoria laughed nervously. Well, just look at her, that dress, those shoes, that old purse. This is the Terra Foundation Gala, not some community center dinner. We have standards to maintain. Standards, Keanu repeated, as if he was thinking about the word. Tell me, what do you know about the Terra Foundation's work? Linda waved her hand dismissively. Oh, they help refugees and poor people on other planets. Very noble, I am sure. But tonight is about raising money, not actually dealing with those messy situations. Messy situations, Keanu said. He took a step closer to the group. Are you talking about the war on Proxima 7, where 3 million people lost their homes when the crystal mines exploded? The women looked at each other uncertainly. Betty tried to keep smiling. Well, yes, those kinds of things are terrible, of course. But we cannot solve every problem in the galaxy. Keanu nodded slowly. You are right. We cannot solve every problem. But some people try harder than others. He looked directly at Sandra. Some people spend 15 years of their lives sleeping in refugee camps and eating basic rations to help families find new homes. Victoria's smile became strained. That is very admirable, I suppose. But what does that have to do with tonight? This woman, Keanu said, gesturing toward Sandra, has personally helped over 10,000 refugee families relocate to safe planets. She speaks 6 alien languages fluently and has trained more than 200 aid workers in cross-species communication. The socialites were quiet now. Around them, other guests had stopped their own conversations to listen. The string quartet continued playing, but their music seemed softer somehow. Keanu continued, his voice still calm but carrying across the ballroom. She developed the cultural sensitivity protocols that every human diplomat now uses when working with alien species. Her work has prevented at least 3 interstellar conflicts that could have cost millions of lives. Sandra looked surprised. She had not expected anyone at the gala to know about her work in such detail. Most people saw only the final results, not the years of careful negotiation and relationship building that made those results possible. Linda tried to recover. Well, that is very nice, but she still could have dressed better for tonight. First impressions matter in diplomatic situations. You are absolutely right, Keanu agreed. First impressions do matter. He paused and looked around the circle of women. What impression do you think you are making on our alien guests tonight? For the first time, the socialites seemed to notice that several alien dignitaries had moved closer to watch the conversation. Ambassador Zeth stood about 10 feet away, his silver skin now very dark with disapproval. High Minister Kira was beside him, her blue face showing the purple flush that indicated strong emotion among her people. Victoria's confidence began to crack. I do not understand what you mean. Ambassador Zeth stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice had the musical quality typical of his species, but his words were perfectly clear. I have worked with Sandra for 5 years. She helped negotiate the peace treaty between my people and the Rigel Confederation. Without her understanding of both cultures, the war would have continued for decades. High Minister Kira moved to stand beside Sandra. This woman saved my nephew's life when raiders attacked the mining colony on Kepler 442. She organized the evacuation and stayed behind to make sure every family got to safety, even when the transport ships were under fire. More alien dignitaries began to approach the group. A tall being with green skin and forearms stepped forward. Sandra trained the medical teams that stopped the plague outbreak on New Ganymede. My people owe her a great debt. Another alien, this one with crystalline features that sparkled in the ballroom lights, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. She is known among the Stellar Council as the human who builds bridges. Her reputation reaches across 12 star systems. The socialites looked around in growing panic as more aliens gathered near them. These were not just random party guests. They were ambassadors, ministers, and council members from some of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Betty tried one more time to control the situation. Well, that is all very impressive, but surely you can understand that appearance matters at formal events. We were just trying to help her fit in better. Ambassador Zeth's skin became almost black. Among my people, we judge worth by actions, not by decorations. Your behavior tonight has been very educational. High Minister Kira spoke directly to Sandra, ignoring the socialites completely. I want to thank you again for your work with the Centauri refugee children. They still sing the songs you taught them to help them remember their home world. Sandra's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of gratitude, not pain. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more to me than you know." Keanu watched as the alien dignitaries continued to gather around Sandra, each one sharing a story about how she had helped their people. The socialites found themselves pushed to the edges of the conversation, no longer the center of attention. Victoria, Linda, and Betty huddled together, whispering urgently among themselves. They were beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake, but they did not yet know how terrible it really was. Around the ballroom, other guests were starting to take notice of the unusual gathering. Human diplomats and military officers began moving toward the group, drawn by the presence of so many important alien representatives. The evening was taking a very different turn than anyone had expected. The conversation around Sandra was growing louder as more people joined the group. Human guests who had been watching from across the ballroom began walking over to see what was happening. The socialites found themselves being pushed further and further away from the center of attention. A man in a military uniform approached the gathering. His chest was covered with medals from different star systems, and his rank insignia showed he was a high-ranking officer. Captain Jake Morris of the Federation Diplomatic Corps stopped in front of Sandra and gave her a respectful salute. "Ms. Sandra," he said formally, "I did not expect to see you here tonight. Should you not be preparing for the Vega Prime Summit next week?" Sandra looked surprised. "I thought Captain Helen was handling the Vega Prime negotiations." "She was," Captain Morris replied. "But the Vegan Council specifically requested you. They said they would only sign the Mineral Rights Treaty if you were there to oversee the cultural exchange protocols." Victoria, Linda, and Betty exchanged worried glances. They were starting to understand that Sandra was much more important than they had realized, but they still did not know the full extent of their mistake. Another person pushed through the crowd toward Sandra. Dr. Amy Foster wore a simple black dress, but the badges on her sash showed she was Earth's chief xenobiologist. She smiled warmly when she saw Sandra. "There you are," Dr. Foster said. "I have been looking for you all evening. The Council of Sciences wants to discuss your proposal for the new Cultural Training Center on Mars. They are very excited about the project." "What cultural training center?" Sandra asked. "The one based on your sensitivity training programs," Dr. Foster explained. "Every human who works with alien species now has to complete your courses before they can get certified for off-world duty. The success rate for diplomatic missions has increased by 40% since we started using your methods." Ambassador Zeth nodded his agreement. "Sandra's training programs are now required for all Federation personnel, not just humans. My own people have adapted her techniques for working with species we had never been able to communicate with before." The alien dignitaries around Sandra began sharing more stories. A being with purple skin and silver eyes spoke about how Sandra's refugee settlement designs had been copied on 17 different worlds. Another alien, whose species looked like walking trees, explained how her conflict resolution methods had ended a civil war that had lasted 50 years. High Minister Kira placed a gentle hand on Sandra's shoulder. "You should know that the Centauri Alliance has nominated you for the Galactic Peace Prize. The ceremony is next month on the capital world." Sandra's face went pale. "I had no idea. I just do my job." "Your job," said a deep voice from behind. "The crowd has changed the course of galactic history." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. A tall man in a military uniform walked toward them. The insignia on his collar showed he was a fleet commander. His name tag read, "Commander Rick Stone." Betty Stone gasped when she saw him. "Honey, what are you doing here? I thought you were still out in the Rim territories." Commander Stone looked at his wife with cold eyes. "I came back early for the gala. I wanted to meet the woman who created the evacuation protocols that saved my entire crew last month." He turned to Sandra and extended his hand. "It is an honor to meet you, ma'am. When the Draconian raiders attacked our supply convoy, we used your emergency procedures. All 600 crew members made it to safety because of the systems you designed." Betty's face turned white. She had just spent the evening mocking the woman who had saved her husband's life. More military officers began approaching the group. A general with gray hair and numerous combat ribbons spoke about how Sandra's cultural guides had prevented his troops from accidentally starting a war with a species that communicated through color changes. A Space Force captain thanked her for the first aid techniques that had saved alien civilians during a station evacuation. Victoria tried to get closer to the conversation, hoping to repair some of the damage she had done. "Sandra, I want to apologize. I had no idea about your important work. Perhaps we could start over?" Sandra looked at her for a long moment. "I appreciate the apology, but I am not the one you should be worried about." "What do you mean?" Victoria asked nervously. Ambassador Zeth's skin grew even darker. "Your behavior tonight has been observed by representatives from 43 different star systems. We came here to honor humans like Sandra, who represent the best of your species. Instead, we have witnessed cruelty and ignorance." High Minister Kira stepped forward. "My people have been allies with Earth for 20 years. We chose to work with humans because we believed you were different from other species we had met. You seem to value kindness and cooperation over power and wealth." "We still do," Sandra said quickly. "These women do not represent all humans." "We know that," said the crystalline alien who had spoken earlier. "But they represent themselves as leaders of human society. What are we supposed to think when your social leaders treat your heroes with such contempt?" The socialites were now completely surrounded by alien dignitaries, military officers, and scientists. Each person in the growing crowd had a story about how Sandra's work had made their lives better or safer. Dr. Foster pulled out a small device and began reading from it. "According to our records, Sandra's refugee programs have helped over 2 million beings find new homes. Her diplomatic training has been used in every major peace negotiation for the past decade. Her emergency protocols are now standard throughout the Federation fleet." Captain Morris nodded. "The economic value of the trade agreements she has helped negotiate is estimated at over 3 trillion credits. The lives saved by her humanitarian work cannot even be counted." Linda tried to speak up. "We really did not know. If someone had told us who she was, we never would have said those things." Commander Stone looked at his wife and her friends with disgust. "You should not need to know someone is famous to treat them with basic respect. The fact that you were cruel to someone you thought was powerless says everything about your character." The alien dignitaries began talking among themselves in their own languages. Sandra could understand several of them, and what she heard made her worry. They were discussing whether humans could really be trusted if this was how their wealthy citizens behaved. Keanu stepped forward again. "I think we need to remember why we are all here tonight. This gala exists to raise money for refugee assistance. Perhaps we should focus on that goal instead of dwelling on misunderstandings." But the damage was already done. The socialites had revealed their true nature in front of the most important beings in the galaxy, and there was no way to take back what had been said and done. Ambassador Zeth raised one of his long silver arms to get everyone's attention. The conversations around him gradually stopped as people turned to listen. His dark skin began to lighten slightly, which meant he was trying to control his emotions. "I would like to say something to all the humans here tonight," he began, his musical voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. "My people have been part of the Galactic Federation for over 300 years. In that time, we have met many different species. Some were strong warriors. Others had amazing technology. A few were very smart and could solve difficult problems. The crowd grew larger as more guests stopped what they were doing to listen. Even the string quartet put down their instruments. The only sounds were the quiet hum of the space station's engines and the soft whisper of air through the ventilation systems. But humans are different," Ambassador Zeth continued. "When we first met your people 50 years ago, we were not impressed by your weapons. Other species had better guns and bigger ships. We were not amazed by your science. Other worlds had more advanced computers and faster engines." Victoria, Linda, and Betty stood at the edge of the crowd, trying to look invisible. They wanted to leave, but too many people were blocking their path to the exits. "What made us notice humans was something much more rare," the ambassador said. "It was your ability to understand pain that was not your own. It was your willingness to help beings you had never met before. It was your talent for seeing the good in creatures who looked nothing like you. High Minister Kira stepped forward to stand beside Ambassador Zeth. The purple flush around her ritual scars had faded to a soft pink, which showed she was feeling hopeful rather than angry. When the Great War came to our home system 15 years ago, she said, we had nowhere to go. Our enemy had better weapons and more ships. We thought our people would be destroyed or enslaved. Then Sandra came to our refugee camps. She turned to look directly at Sandra, who was still standing in the center of the group with tears in her eyes. She did not come with an army to fight for us, High Minister Kira continued. She came with food and medicine and temporary shelters, but more important than those things, she came with respect. She learned our language. She studied our customs. She treated our children like they were her own children. A new voice joined the conversation. The crystalline being who had spoken earlier stepped into the circle of light cast by the chandeliers. When he moved, his body made soft chiming sounds like distant bells. I am Minister Quartz of the Silicon Worlds, he said. My people do not understand emotions the way organic beings do. For many years, this made it very hard for us to work with other species. They thought we were cold and cruel because we did not show feelings in ways they could recognize. He looked around at the human faces watching him. Sandra spent 2 years living on our home world, learning how we think and feel. She created the first translation programs that could explain our thought patterns to other species. Because of her work, my people are no longer isolated and alone in the galaxy. More alien dignitaries began sharing their stories. A being with green fur and large eyes told how Sandra had helped his people recover from a plague that had nearly destroyed their civilization. A creature that looked like a giant butterfly explained how she had prevented a trade war that could have ruined both their economies. Each story revealed another layer of Sandra's impact on galactic society. She had not just helped individual refugees or solved single problems. She had built bridges between entire civilizations and created systems that would protect millions of beings for generations to come. Dr. Foster stepped forward with her device again. I have been calculating some numbers while we have been talking, she announced. The economic value of the peace treaties Sandra has helped negotiate is actually closer to 5 trillion credits, not 3. Captain Morris nodded his agreement. And the military savings are even more impressive. The conflicts she has prevented would have cost an estimated 50 million lives and used resources equal to the entire Federation budget for a decade. Commander Stone looked directly at his wife, Betty. Do you understand now? The woman you were mocking tonight has done more to keep us safe and prosperous than any general or admiral in the fleet. Betty's face was red with shame. She tried to speak but could not find any words that seemed appropriate for the situation. Linda and Victoria were whispering frantically to each other, trying to figure out how to escape from the disaster they had created. But there was nowhere to hide in the crowded ballroom. Ambassador Zeth was not finished speaking. There is something else you humans should know, he said. Every year, the Galactic Federation chooses one species to host the annual Peace Summit. This is a great honor that brings trade benefits worth billions of credits. He paused and looked around the room. For the past 10 years, Earth has been chosen to host this summit. Do you know why? The human guests shook their heads. Most of them had assumed it was because Earth was centrally located or had good facilities for large meetings. Earth is chosen because of people like Sandra, the ambassador explained. The Federation Council believes that humans understand the true meaning of cooperation and peace. We trust your species to handle delicate negotiations because we have seen how your best representatives behave. High Minister Kira added, but tonight some of our member species are asking questions. If humans treat their own heroes with such cruelty, how can we trust them to treat alien guests with respect? A murmur of worry went through the crowd of human guests. They were beginning to understand that the socialites' behavior could have consequences far beyond one embarrassing evening. The crystalline Minister Quartz spoke again. My people are logical beings. We judge by evidence, not by emotions. The evidence we have seen tonight suggests that human society may value wealth and appearance more than kindness and achievement. Sandra finally found her voice. Please do. Not judge all humans by what happened here tonight. Most of my people are good and kind. These women do not represent our true values. We hope that is true, Ambassador Zeth replied. But the damage has been done. Word of tonight's events will spread throughout the Federation. It will take time to rebuild the trust that has been lost. The socialites realized that their cruel words had not just hurt one person's feelings. They had potentially damaged humanity's reputation across the entire galaxy. Keanu stepped into the center of the circle, his calm presence commanding everyone's attention. The ballroom had grown completely quiet except for the soft sounds of the space station moving through space. Even the alien dignitaries waited to hear what he would say. I have been listening to all of you tonight, he began, his voice steady and clear. I have heard stories about Sandra's work that even I did not know. I have seen the concern in our alien friends' eyes about what happened here, and I think it is time to talk about what it really means to be human. He looked around at all the faces watching him, human and alien alike. 50 years ago, when Earth first made contact with other intelligent species, we were not the strongest civilization in the galaxy. We were not the smartest or the most advanced. We were just another small planet with big dreams and bigger problems. Victoria, Linda, and Betty tried to move toward the back of the crowd, but people were packed too, tightly around them. They were trapped in place, forced to listen to every word. What made humans special was not our technology or our weapons, Keanu continued. It was our ability to look at a being completely different from ourselves and see not a monster or an enemy, but a potential friend. It was our willingness to help others even when there was no profit in it for us. He gestured toward Sandra, who stood surrounded by alien dignitaries like a queen surrounded by her court. This woman represents everything that is best about humanity. She has spent her life serving others, asking for nothing in return except the chance to make the galaxy a little bit safer and kinder. Ambassador Zeth's silver skin began to lighten as his mood improved. This is the humanity we chose to work with, he said. This is why my people signed our first treaty with Earth, instead of with other more powerful species. Dr. Foster stepped forward with new information on her device. I have just received a message from the Federation Trade Council, she announced. They want to renew Earth's exclusive trading rights for rare minerals from the Andromeda colonies. The contract is worth 800 billion credits over the next 5 years. Captain Morris nodded. And the Federation Defense Council has approved funding for 12 new patrol stations in human-controlled space. The cost would normally be 200 billion credits, but they are providing it free because of our diplomatic success rate. Commander, Stone looked directly at his wife Betty. Do you understand now? The work that Sandra and people like her do is not just about helping refugees. It is about maintaining relationships that keep our entire civilization prosperous and safe. ITAR, Minister Kira spoke up. The Centauri Alliance has been planning to share our advanced medical technology with Earth. Our healers have developed treatments that can extend human life by 50 years and cure diseases that still kill thousands of your people. She paused and looked at the socialites with disappointment. But after tonight, some of our council members are wondering if humans have become too focused on wealth and status to deserve such gifts. The human guests in the ballroom began to understand the full scale of what was at stake. The cruel behavior of a few wealthy women could cost humanity medical advances, trade agreements, and defense partnerships worth trillions of credits and millions of lives. Betty finally found the courage to speak. We are sorry, she said, her voice shaking. We made a terrible mistake. We did not know who Sandra was or how important her work is. That is exactly the problem, Keanu replied firmly. You should not need to know someone is famous or important to treat them with basic human decency. The fact that you were cruel to someone you thought was powerless reveals who you really are. Linda tried to defend herself. We were just joking around. We did not mean any real harm. Minister Quartz's crystalline form chimed softly as he moved. Among my people we have a saying. The true nature of a being is revealed when they believe no one important is watching. Tonight we were all watching. Victoria made one last desperate attempt to save face. But surely you can understand that appearance matters at formal events like this. We have an image to maintain. You are absolutely right, Keanu agreed. Image does matter, and the image you have created tonight is of humans who value expensive clothes more than good deeds, who measure worth by bank accounts rather than by lives saved. He turned to address the entire ballroom. But that is not who we are as a species. That is not why the Galactic Federation chose to work with us. We earned our place among the stars not through conquest or intimidation, but through the simple act of caring about others. Sandra stepped forward, her voice stronger now. I want everyone to know that these women do not represent all of humanity. Most humans are kind and generous. Most humans understand that true strength comes from lifting others up, not from tearing them down. Ambassador Zeth's skin returned to its normal silver color. We know this, Sandra. Your own actions prove it every day. But tonight has reminded us that even among humans, there are those who have forgotten their species' greatest strength. Dr. Foster looked at her device again. I am receiving more messages from the Federation Council. They want to schedule emergency meetings to discuss tonight's events. They are concerned about the cultural direction of human society. Captain Morris sighed heavily. It will take years to repair the damage done tonight. Every time we negotiate with alien species from now on, they will remember how Earth's social elite treated one of our greatest heroes. Commander Stone walked over to stand beside Sandra. Ma'am, I want you to know that the military personnel of Earth stand behind you completely. You represent the values we swore to defend. Other human guests began approaching Sandra as well. Scientists, diplomats, and ordinary citizens formed a line to shake her hand and thank her for her service. They wanted the alien observers to see that not all humans were like the cruel socialites. As the evening continued, the socialites found themselves completely isolated. No one wanted to talk to them or be seen near them. They had destroyed their own reputations while trying to destroy someone else's dignity. The final moment came when Sandra was called to the stage to sign a new interstellar humanitarian treaty. As she walked toward the platform, every alien dignitary in the room stood and applauded. The humans joined in, creating a thunderous sound that echoed through the space station. Victoria, Linda, and Betty slipped quietly out of the ballroom, their expensive dresses and jewelry unable to hide the shame on their faces. They had learned too late that true power comes not from wealth or status, but from the respect earned through service to others. Sandra signed the treaty with a steady hand, surrounded by beings from dozens of different worlds who had come to honor humanity's greatest strength, the simple willingness to care about others no matter how different they might be.